Hi, I'm Karl from Western Australia. I own a company called Eco Structures, which develops or manufactures ecotourism tents and cabins and modular units, and we sell them around the world. I also have been an owner-operator for tourism for the last 30 years, and I personally own Eco Beach Resort, which is one of the most remote resorts in the world, up in Broome, Western Australia. So I've been involved in tourism since I was in my early 20s. I first started off backpackers when in Broome for 10 years. And I used to run these adventure tours up through the Kimberley. And when asking the customers what they most enjoyed was they enjoyed being in the bush, being in the middle of nowhere and sleeping under the stars. So then I went out to set myself a target to actually build for the future, which the experiential tourism was back 30 years ago. If backpackers were the future tourist, their demands were those requirements. So I went out and I found a property in the middle of nowhere, which is a place called Broome, Western Australia, which is just about the most remote place in the world. If you draw a circle around Broome of 300 kilometres, total, well actually if you draw a circle around Broome of 600 kilometres, the total catchment is about 40,000 people. And if you did that in Asia, you'd be in a few hundred million people. So it's very remote. And then from there, I set out to build a remote ecotourism resort. I was only 28, 29 years old at the time, and we built a property called Eco Beach. Unfortunately for Eco Beach, this is when we were operating for about 4 years, and then the largest cyclone ever across the Australian coast blew us apart. So from there, we had to go and rebuild. And in the rebuilding process, by the way, Eco Beach won all the National Tourism Awards, the Domestic Tourism Awards, British Airways Tourism of Tomorrow Awards, and so it was quite a significant ecotourism property at its time. We were completely recyclable, all our energy waste on site, and we had worm farms, we had all the sort of buzzy eco stuff which nobody had any idea about 30 years ago. So we were at the forefront of the future of tourism. So it was quite an exciting thing to be part of until you got blown apart. So what happened to us then? We went back into redevelop, and then we knew what the things worked and what the things that didn't work. So we actually had to get the capital cost down of actually redeveloping Eco Beach. So from there we had to develop a tent, which is now called the Eco Tents, which we've been doing for the last 15 years. So the Eco Tents we developed were a cyclonic proof tent, which is very unusual because of the location we're in, but this actually got the capital cost of the resort down 30 or 40%, because 50% of the rooms are actually in tents and the other 50% of the rooms are in modular prefabricated buildings. So with the tent, it's a little bit different than most tents. It's actually a structural steel tent, handle very, very high winds, and it's then wrapped in canvas. So it gets all the feelings for the tent for the customer and the experience for the customer, but then, obviously then it can handle those elements that we've got in the Kimberleys in the northwest of Australia. So from the eco tent, I've always been a builder all my life. I've done 30 years of remote construction. So most times I actually have to go and build the workers camp, and after the workers camp, then we build the properties, whether they become houses or in this particular case, it's the property called Karajini. Again, absolutely in the middle of nowhere. It's central Western Australia, and it's very interactive with nature. It's a perfect example of where the tent is provided for accommodation only, and the experience is the location. So, I go back to, what is ecotourism, and quite often I always say that you sleep for free and pay for the experience. So the experience is the gorges, the waterfalls, the location, sleeping outside, all of that stuff. That's the experience, and then the accommodation is an add-on to it. So when you have a room rate is not necessarily just judged on what the room feels like in a standard hotel. In ecotourism or the glamping tented tourism, it's all about the experience. So in Karajini, its physical location is just amazing where it is. It's right in between all these gorges. Joffrey's Gorge is just alongside. It's one of the most iconic places in Western Australia. And we set out to build that. We actually put 15 kilometres of underground mains in, That's how far apart the tents were. And the traditional owners gave us a brief on, they wanted everyone to feel isolated when they sleep at night, and because the property was absolutely massive, you were able to do this, and that fundamentally caused quite a few service problems with the power, water and sewage and so forth. But if you've ever been to the Pilbara, it's designed from iron ore, and you can actually pick two rocks up and join the two rocks together and actually weld them because they're actually iron. So it's an interesting place, and very very unique to this day. It's our very standard tent. It's a 4.2 metre tent with a bathroom. High season they get $375 a night with very high occupancy, and it's a very humble tent. It's not this high-end glamping stuff that you see today, but the experience for everybody in Karijini is just sensational, which the experience is the location and its natural setting. Look, when we talk extreme locations, look, Karijini is very extreme, and also Eco Beach is extreme, and then sometimes like up in the Northern Territories where we've actually got you 700 kilometres you drive down a dirt track to some of the island land properties, and then you actually barge it across to some of the islands, and we've been built in such amazing places like that, and where the barge comes up the beach and you carry all the gear out to actually build the tents. But probably here in China is probably the most unusual. It's actually on the tea trading area up in Kunming, and the tents were actually elevated 6 meters above the ground, and then there's a walkway connecting all the tents. It's one of the most amazing views, and if you go back to like this, the sense of space and what people are looking for, these places in China are just exceptional. Like Vinetree have done an amazing job of it, and when you're there, probably my really most exciting place that we just provided the tents, we didn't do the building, but it was an old paddy field on top of a hill, and you went up in little dirt bikes to get to the top of the hill, and up there was a 400-year-old village, and they actually put the tents inside the village. It was a joint venture with private enterprise and government, and the tents were placed inside the old stone houses, and then as you sat there on your deck, you overlooked the paddy fields, and everyone talks about how soothing it is to watch water flow and like the waterfalls and things like that, but it's a completely different thing when you actually see the whole mountain moving as the water goes down through the paddy fields, and it's to this day is one of the most unique spots I've ever been to. It's not by nature. Everything I like is by beach, and this was in up 3,000 meters up a hill, and the villagers have all gone down to the village to work because the paddy fields are so far up, but now the customers have moved to the top, and the actual locals have moved to the bottom, which is quite unusual. If I was the locals, I'd move back to the top again because it's really quite special. Look, some of the most interesting projects are, we love working with architects, and who are I, what do we do? So for 30 years I've done remote construction, and then now I moved back to the city with my family. So I have all this knowledge of remote construction, how difficult it is there, power, water, sewage, and all these locations. So we actually work really well with architects there to design and develop what they want to do and their expressions of what they want to do. So one of the exciting projects we're working with at the moment is working with Adrian Zecker. He's 86 years old. His energy is like a 30-year-old, and he's developing the Zaria brand, which is he wants to run tented resorts throughout Asia and the world, which are following off from the Oman brand. And it's a really exciting tent. I can't really show you because it's his IP, it's his tent, but it's a very special tent, and it's you go back to what Sally from Gap Architects did with this project here in the background. Is Sally is a bit like Adrian Zecker. She's got very specific design and needs that she wanted, and we just interpret that, like where Adrian Zecker wanted to walk under the tent as he came inside, so he felt like he was going camping. And Sally in this project here, she wanted to peep out of the tents, so she wanted to bring it all down. So that's sort of how the structures and the buildings work at one with nature, and how the feelings are when you're inside it's very specific, and we would not be brave enough to actually not do it with the local based knowledge of somebody who understands the location, the needs, the clients, the environment, and all of those things. We just have to listen to the architects and interpret what they would like, and the owners, and then develop that. So we work with many architects around the world interpreting their ideas and stuff. And it's very important also when you're interpreting these sort of special, exciting projects, is to understand who the client is, who the customer's going to be, what the room rate's going to be, and what their expectations are. And I always like, Eco Beach, our own property, we go like, what's our 5 most important assets, and it's got actually nothing to do with buildings. Our assets are, the bushwalk, the creek, Cape Villeray, the mangrove systems, the wader birds, and they're all our assets. And that's what you sort of, you develop and design the resort around those assets, and that's what the customer's going to do, and how does he interact as an accommodation into doing those things, which is really important for making a property successful and going forward from there. And also you've got to really take into climate, wind. What's happening now for us as a business is that people are putting them in more and more extreme places, and the engineering side of actually what we're proposing is starting to be, you start off with engineering and you come back with design afterwards, because you're in high winds, or you're in cold climates, hot climates, tropical climates, the Middle East, and where you're outside you've got 50 degrees, inside you want 21 degrees. Well, you've got condensation problems like you would have in any building. Like you always remember driving down the road in a car and you've got condensation on one side. Well, those issues come out with the tent, so working with the local knowledge is really important for us as we design things. Look, going forward, what do operators have to look at in the design of the accommodation and the customer experience? So that everything is about customer experience. And for our own property here, Eco Beach, we've actually started to do a thing called a long table dinner, and it's actually gone crazy. It just goes back to people and experiences and what they're looking for. So this particular long table, we have 40 people at it, so the resort might have 100 in, and you have to pre-book to be at the long table dinner, and it's very exciting. It's outside, it's by a fire under the stars, and it's starting to be quite unique and simple to do. So it's what do we need to design for? Well, these experiences, you need to design them into the resort, so operationally it's easy to do. It's not too far away from the restaurant, it's close to the amenities and stuff like that, and then amazing things can be done simply, and then the future tourists can actually have these experiences, which is, I think, what everyone wants is, going forward. And on the right hand side there's a little one of we call it the sunset dinner, which is basically we can only do 2 to 3 tables a night, because it actually, unfortunately for Australia, we don't have lots of staff floating around because of our wage costs, but you can, that again is always booked out. It's a romantic dinner on the sand dunes, and it's close to the resort, so we can provide the food, but they get their special night. And again, it's an exciting project to do, and customers just love it, and it's really working well for us. So all of these things, you've got to think about how they actually work and interact with the resort and interface. So operationally, they're not actually a burden; they're an asset rather than a cost centre, and hopefully a profit centre. Look, travel trends in the future, like it's very interesting what the customers want. Like, so at Eco Beach ourselves, we've got half the property in tents and half the property in beautiful luxury villas. I would actually argue that we can, for us, you can come in by plane, you can come in by road, and you can also come in by chopper. We're 17 minutes across the bay from Broome. I would say that 50% more people come by helicopter to sleep in a tent than they do into a luxury villa. So it goes back to, what's that really telling you? It's telling you experiential tourism, and it's not me that's doing it, it's customers are voting with their feet, so what they're looking for. And Mudgee on this particular photograph, Mudgee's a property just out of New South Wales and Sydney, and it's up a mountain. It tends to be 300 to 400 metres apart from each other, so that gives you the ability to put the bath on the front veranda, and you can actually quite happily and comfortably sit there without anyone seeing you, because you're actually kilometres from anywhere else. And he's able to drive a room rate, which is our same tent, which is a 36 square metre tent. His room rate is double what it is on most places in the rest of Australia, because again, the experience of remote, bath on the front deck, and fly in by chopper, all of those things. All of those drives is room rate for that experiential tourism. So go back to the thoughts of people pay for experiences, they don't pay for beds. So beds on for sale, experiences are for sale. So it's basically what the driving people in the future is. People are no longer want to sit around the table and say, oh, you should have seen my hotel in Bali. I had 7 types of choices on the banquet table. Well, that actually doesn't get you any airtime with your friends anymore. What gets you airtime is that you're in the middle of nowhere and you had a clawfoot bath and you were sitting there with candles floating in it and you're looking up at the stars. That gets you airtime with your friends because that's unique and that's special and everyone can do it. So the special experiences are going to be what people are going to be driving for in the future. Look, my proudest achievement, I guess, is to completely reinvent myself. Because if you spent 30 years in construction, we used to have 100 people, we used to run 5 or 6 projects. You know, the distance between the projects quite often were 2,000 or 3,000 kilometres between each project, and you know, we had trucks and excavators and all sorts of, you know, wild and woolly things. And then, so for us then, we came to Perth with the kids, so the kids go to school, so I couldn't really do the things I used to do for 30 years. So but the things I did do was actually build tented resorts, and I built modular housing, and I did all that. So what we've done from there, we've been able to actually put all of that package together and form a company called EcoStructures. And EcoStructures is an exciting project, you know, because it's got all of those things of 30 years of experience on how fast you can build, the knowledge you can build, and then being able to build in all these different wacky locations, you know, on top of hills in China and, you know, remote islands in the northwest coast to, you know, the central locations of Africa to US Virgin Isles, and you know, it's all, every one of them is exciting, and they've all got logistical problems and things like that. So us as a company, we don't just provide you know, accommodation units, we actually provide advice on the best way to build. And you know, so quite often myself, I actually help the developers on site on logistics and timeframes and things like that. So it's exciting to be part of that. So and then having a product that you can actually stretch like a big elastic band, you know, like it's, so when you're putting it in places with high winds of 150 kilometers an hour, or then the next location you need to be thermally efficient, so because you haven't got the power on site to actually run the air cons, so therefore you need to make a wall which is building like, I always say that some of the high-end tents is actually built like a house but looks like a tent. You know, it's got a standard wall, it's got double glazed glass, but then you've actually then got to wrap all of that up and then make it look like a tent, and that's pretty exciting. And you know, so I guess my proudest achievements is all bringing all the parts together of some of our inventions of our little eco anchor and the panelised wall system and the structural kits, and so all of that put together helps people follow their dreams and build in these really cool locations in a cost-effective method. And I guess that's what I enjoy doing. And you know, and you don't get driven by money, you get driven by actually doing it. That's the most fun. Inspiration is actually comes through the door every day, you know, like for us, you know, so the inspiration, you know, people like this, the top right hand corner here is over in Sydney, and it's actually up a river, and you've got to smile, like the ingenuity of people and the location. So they actually put some swimming pools in, and how would you get your swimming pool if you had to go and barge it up a river and to the location? Well, quite often barges are too expensive. So on this particular site, we actually floated the swimming pool because it was fiberglass and towed it up with a small tinny up the river. And you know, so those sort of inspirations from the site itself, helping people deliver things that in a normal world can't be delivered, but without any impact. This particular photograph, actually, the property is only going to open in a week's time, and if you look at the tents there, they look like they've been there for the last 20 years of their life. You know, you damage nothing, you can go in because it's on stumps, you can do it off the ground. So the bracing is, all of those things are just a kit that makes it all happen. So the inspiration of that, and then what then is happening for us at the moment is people are asking for bigger and bigger and bigger things. You know, like so some of the projects in the Middle East, they want 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom. So you know, for those people that don't understand this, you know, probably the hardest thing is actually doing ceilings and the stretches, because they just become so big. You know, you're talking about 300 kgs of PVC on a roof, and the logistics of getting it up there and how to do it. So we've actually developed a modularized box system that you can actually get the boxes and join them together. So the inspiration were out of necessity because some things just couldn't be that big, so you had to break it into smaller parts to make it work. And it's not like building in bricks, you're building in lightweight structures, and then you're asking those lightweight structures quite often to be 1 metre in the air or 2 metres in the air, or a high wind area, or glass across the front. So all of that, you actually need a very smart system, otherwise you'll just waste so much money on structural engineering and making things happen. And we also, the inspiration comes from the architects, because the architects give us their vision of what they would like to do. So the inspiration, we just have a system that will adapt to just about everybody's inspiration, I guess you'd call it, because quite often the look is caused by the interior designer with the finishes or the external fabrics of the outside of the building. So they're actually the personality that comes out of the final result, but it's just using our system to deliver it, and that's quite exciting for us. The idea of luxury travel, that's an interesting question. So what is luxury? I always remember there was a lady that came to our very first Eco Beach, and when we won the British Airways Award, she was from the Tatler magazine. And she wrote a line about Eco Beach. So Eco Beach was just little wooden cabins on the beach in the middle of nowhere, built 30 years ago, or 20 something years ago. And so we were out there in the forefront. We'd won all the Eco Tourism Awards, and we were about to win the British Airways Awards Tourism of Tomorrow. And she came up with a caption for me, which really sticks in my head, and goes like, are you simple enough? Are you sophisticated enough to be simple enough? And so the future of luxury travel is a little bit like that. It's not for everybody. I always say that quite often the ecotourism is the people with the money want to stand on the fence and look into the wilderness. So what that basically means, the future is having these amazingly comfortable places on the edge of the wilderness, so you can actually immerse yourself in the wilderness but come back to safety. And that's kind of what the cruise ships are doing as well. They're taking you into these amazing locations where you can come back to your safety and your comfort of your main place. So that's what I think the future is going to be. There's going to be these spectacular places which are going to charge an amazing amount of room rates. And what are they really selling? They're selling experiences. They're not selling beds. And that's what the future is going to be. It's all about what is the customer's experience and expectations wants to be. And it's very hard, I would say, going forward in the future to deliver that in volume. I think the future is going to be small camps and 20 units, sort of say, because it's very hard to give an individual experience of that candlelit dinner individually, and then try and roll it out by 100 rooms, because it's no longer special anymore. Unless you've got hundreds of staff and you can drive them all out into the wilderness and then have them all special, a few kilometres from each other. But what people are paying for is that unique experience, which I don't know whether it's going to happen with mass tourism. It's going to be small boutique tourism is where I think that the future will be.
Awesome.